So thank you again for joining us. We again have a few insights, so we'll go through this quickly here. What we did for our, first of all, we have a panel on innovation every ADI forum. And then what we do, because we ourselves at ADI do quite a bit of work in and around innovation, technology assessments with early stage companies and all of that. But this time what we did is, instead of covering innovation in different markets, we made AI the central theme of innovation, and then we've kind of pulled a lot of research that we have been seeing. Some of this is our research, some of this is third-party research that we have been seeing in and around artificial intelligence and what is its opportunity in and around different markets, right? If Sean Ebert yesterday took a dig at McKinsey about this McKinsey study on digitalization, but if there's something new happening, McKinsey does take the time to put some interesting stuff out. So we have some market estimates here that we have then gathered and compared with some other market estimates on what is the potential impact of AI, right? When we first saw this slide, I thought there was a typo. It should be billion and not trillion, but it's actually trillion. So take those numbers for whatever it is worth, but it seems like there's a pretty large-sized market impact that people are expecting from AI. So we then said, okay, what is the near-term view, right? Like, what is it going to do in the near term? It's one thing to say that sometime in the forever future you're going to see $20 trillion of impact from AI, but what is it going to look like in the next few years? So that's what this chart is on the right, showing it's a couple $1 trillion, right? So what we then did is we said, okay, let's look at some interesting use cases. Now, some of these use cases we are familiar with because we have been working with some of these companies over the last couple of years. And we then said, okay, let's take a look at in and around some of the markets that we serve, right? So these are some interesting examples of companies that are active with AI offerings in and around oil and gas. So for example, Blueware, which was recently acquired by CMG, is developing, has a tool that is based on AI for interpreting seismic data interactively. We see a lot of AI-based tools that are being used by the different operating companies, Range and Chevron there, for example, for different applications. And then some other tools as well. Immubit, for example, is using AI-based software to optimize refining operations. If you then flip into chemicals, right, I mean, we see, again, different companies offering different kinds of tools here. So Aspen's here, and Anna will talk a little bit more about what they do in and around downstream and chemicals here in a little bit. But we have some early stage companies, we have some fairly mature companies that are trying to address different pain points in and around the chemicals value chain using artificial intelligence. Utilities, if we look at in general digitalization in oil and gas, energy and chemical markets, the markets that we serve, we feel that digital has a much deeper and broader footprint in utilities relative to some of the other oil and gas markets. So when we look at the role of AI, for example, we are seeing a lot of traditional problems being re-looked at by AI. So one of the biggest challenges in utilities is how do you forecast with a fairly high degree of certainty what demand will look like, and then that then gives supply or generation an opportunity to respond. A few years ago, if you'd asked me that question, I'd have said that, okay, there's quite a few tools that are out there and they do a fairly good job. There's been actually a lot of consolidation in and around the companies that offer those tools. And that it's a fairly established problem. But then if you just look at what's happened in the last, I'd say, couple of years, there have been lots of new interesting early stage companies that have come up. DeepMind here is one example, but then there's also another early stage startup here in Houston called Amperon that is developing interesting new AI-based tools to better forecast just demand for electric power, right? So that's one example. There are a number of other examples here as well. And similarly, we have other end-use cases in industrial markets, again, addressing a number of issues. A lot of this, at least in industrials, tends to be in and around optimizing the supply chain and better forecasting what demand and supply looks like across different points in the supply chain in order to optimize costs, essentially. And then finally, we've been doing a lot of work in and around critical minerals, and that's, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but that's a massive pain point right now in and around energy transition. The demand that is expected because of energy transition on critical minerals and metals is very high. In comparison, it's a segment that's already declining in terms of access to high quality ores. So there's a real problem there, and we have been looking at a lot of new technologies to address critical minerals and increasing recovery, and we are seeing quite a bit of AI-based tools that are coming up here. Most of them tend to be early-stage companies, and when we talk to them, they tell us that they have the same issues that some of the early-stage AI and digital companies have in oil and gas, which is adoption in the sector continues to be fairly challenging. So that's a little bit of context there in terms of one element of where we are seeing a lot of innovation in the space. We have a very interesting panel here, so let's talk a little bit about how each of these panelists sees innovation. They all have very different perspectives because they're looking at different, looking at oil and gas, energy transition, and chemicals markets, but from different points of view. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation. Anna, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about AspenTech's fairly well known, I would say. I'd be surprised if anybody doesn't know AspenTech, but at the same time, some sort of an intro to Aspen would be helpful. And maybe talk a little bit about how you see innovation and Aspen's role in some of these markets.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for staying around for this late afternoon panel. AspenTech is, if you're not familiar with what they do, is actually a leading provider of industrial software for asset-intensive industries. We have been around for over 40 years. The company started as a project in MIT, and because of that reason, actually the headquarters still remains in Boston. We have offices here in Houston and Mexico City, and we have also offices globally, but the major offices are Boston and Houston, that we have a lot of our developers and solution makers. The way that we look at innovation is we look at the value proposition of a digital solution. This conversation came up multiple times yesterday, right? What's the value that a digital offering is providing for the user? And until we are very clear that what that value is, the user might be reluctant actually to adopt it and to use it, and especially when it comes to industries that like oil and gas, for example, or like chemicals, who are, I would say, they're not the first adopters of every new technology, right? So if you look at the curve, there was actually a study by McKinsey a couple years ago that chemical industry is way behind some of the other industries in adopting new technologies. So how we can position the digital solution and show it to our client that actually this is going to be useful for the areas that they are trying to make improvements, whether it's improvements in their current operation or some of the newer challenges that they're faced with. We heard a lot today about energy transition and how all of these concepts can actually materialize, how this technology can come into life. And digital solutions are one of the fundamental ways that this thing actually can happen, because the projects can be evaluated, the cost can be estimated, and the feasibility in terms of actual creation can be vetted, right? So that's how we look at the value of innovation and how we partner with our clients to actually help them to address their issues.
So Anna, can you give some specific examples? Like a lot of the discussion today has been on energy transition, right? So if you take, let's say, a hydrogen project, a green hydrogen project, or a steam methane reformer, or you take a CCUS plant, or pick any example, right? Like maybe talk a little bit about a specific product from Aspen and how that helps some of those projects.
Sure. So when actually it comes to large projects like this, it's not a single product, right? And we as a company also don't look at our portfolio as products. We look at them as solutions. And that means that actual multiple products can be used on a single project. So for example, if you mentioned SMR, so when you're trying to optimize a hydrogen network, how do you do that, right? So you need the engineering tools to be able to do that. And sometimes you also need to tap into AI and machine learning to actually help you optimize, because in reality, a lot of times in operations, you don't get specific data. You don't have sensors for that particular reactor. You don't have sensors for that section of the operation. So here is the role of AI and machine learning come into play that can actually create that soft sensor for you, and then can help make your model much closer to reality than it can be.
Thank you, that's helpful. Brendan, maybe talk a little bit about who Origina is and what does it do, and its role helping companies in the broader energy chemical space.
Yeah, thanks Uday. Thanks everybody as well for staying around. So Origina is a traditional provider of software support and maintenance for a broad range of software products, typically from those provided by IBM Corporation and HCL. And that's what we do as a business, but the problem that we're solving is one of, I'm talking about AspenTech. If I want to invest in digital transformation, if I want to invest in innovation, if I want to invest in the AI tools that you've been referring to on the board there, some of which I know, well, I can't do that because I don't have the capital to invest. Because according to Gartner IT metrics data, 90% of my enterprise IT budget is being consumed to keep the lights on, right? It's being consumed just to keep the systems that I have today running. So if I want to invest in, the digital transformation market, that market which includes tools of AI, it's about a $5 trillion market right now. But about 10% of that has actually been spent on innovation, right? And you've talked about early adopting, but the reason for the hesitancy is because the money's just not there. Mm-hmm. So if you want to free up the funds, and you can free up significant funds that are being charged to the organizations by what we call the mega vendors, the likes of IBM, and you mentioned SAP was on the board there, Oracle, whoever. If you want to address that issue, you've got to have an alternative way to support the software that you have in-house, that's been run in your data center, that's running the business. And so I can free up the money, but I have to have an alternative because I can't have no support. So Origina is the alternative to support. And when you implement an alternative support provider, I can now free up tens of millions of dollars in support costs, which otherwise would just be consumed annually, and that money can go back into investing in AI, testing tools, investing in tooling and systems like those systems from AspenTech. So we solve a big problem. There's also a problem of risk associated with the vendor, which is multiple times the cost of the maintenance contract. So if your maintenance contract is $20 million in support spend, it's a multiple of that, which is the risk that you're potentially facing associated with being with the vendor in the first place. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But if you want to address the risk and you want to address cost, then you need to have an alternative provider of support. So that's what we do. So we mitigate risk, reduce cost, free up people time and money, give them back to the business to do all the things that were on those slides. So our mandate is big. We want to put people back in control of their assets. We used to be in the hardware game where we used to provide support for legacy hardware because, again, the mega vendors of the hardware make it very difficult for you to maintain it yourself, right? They have proprietary screws. They make the spare parts are unobtainable in the market unless you're a super detective, and they lock down the software. So how do you maintain your own stuff, whether it's a machine or software, without the ability to do that? And the third-party market is what facilitates that. So we're in the third-party software maintenance market. So big problems solved by looking at alternative providers of support.
And I guess what is the value proposition of third-party service providers, third-party support beyond the cost element, right? Obviously, there is a cost, the cost saving as a value proposition, but there are lots of markets where third parties are actually a lot more faster, quicker, nimbler. They actually have deeper expertise because a lot of the focus at the OEMs, I'm kind of borrowing an example from the industrial world, but a lot of the focus at the OEMs is, for example, on new sales as opposed to aftermarket, right? So I'm curious, like for Origina or the broader third-party software support sector, what do you see as the key components of the value proposition?
Yeah, so I mentioned risk. So cost is, freeing up lots of capital back into the business that you'd otherwise might have to borrow, whatever. That's a big deal. But there's a risk associated with being with the vendor, because they're going to force you down a path that is not necessarily of your choosing, right? You have to pay more money to get things fixed if it's older, They are innovating in ways that is not meaningful necessarily to the organizations, right? So the destination of travel of these organizations' hardware and software assets which they own is not necessarily aligned with that of the vendor anymore. 90% margin is made by the vendors on maintenance contracts that they charge the companies that are here, and that money is not going back into the innovation that matters to the organizations, right? So those problems can be solved, right? So it kind of goes deeper than just cost. It's actually freeing up yourself from what we call the vendor-dictated roadmap to allow yourself choice, right? So all of those very innovative technologies that are there, one of them is coming from SAP, but none of those are coming from IBM, right? So if I'm with IBM, which is a very big vendor, they're not innovating in ways that matter, which is on those slides, right? They're innovating in ways that matter to IBM and their shareholders. So if I want to invest in newer technologies that are meaningful to the business, well then I got to free up the capital so I can investigate those tools, which aren't the tools of the vendor I'm talking about, right? It's not AspenTech. It's that IBM has offerings which compete with yours potentially, but I want to invest in AspenTech, but I can't do that because I've got vendor lock. Right? So it's a continuous kind of vicious circle really, and you've got to break away from that in order to free up both your people time and your money to look at the technology, right? If that answers your question.
No, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So, George, tell us a little bit about HQV, it's we were just talking ahead of the panel, but I've known George for now 6-7 years. We've worked on a few things, but today was the first time we actually met in person. So
that's software for you.
So tell us a little bit about HQV and what are some interesting things that you're working on.
Sure. So actually, it's interesting because my background, before founding HQuest, my background is in software, and I see AI has become really this buzzword. I really prefer industrial automation because I've been involved in robotics and industrial automation for basically a decade and a half, and we put autonomy on mining vehicles. But I wanted to, so I moved away from sort of kind of more ephemeral stuff, right? Software bits, digital stuff, into
hard tech, to things
into the stuff that has real value, right? And like actual hard tech. So more than 10 years ago, I founded HQuest as with the goal of decarbonizing natural gas, basically reinventing the way natural gas is used. And we came up with a technology concept, just a very small prototype, and we threw it at a bunch of things. We made, we took natural gas and we made graphene, we made ethylene, we made carbon black. We actually demonstrated the entire pathway from a methane molecule to synthetic graphite, and So we did R&D for 10 years or so, and we realized, okay, now it's time to take it commercial, and the timing was finally right. With the energy transition and decarbonization was something that we could fundamentally enable using our technology, and of course, a lot of the things that we can do right now with a small team, we only have 15 people, 4 of which started in January, are thanks to digitalization, right, and tools such as Aspen, although as a startup we still can't afford Aspen. But we do use multiphysics software a lot. And our first product offering is to the natural gas utilities. It's a system that can convert natural gas basically into decarbonized natural gas, hydrogen, that then can be blended into, not into pipelines, but into a gas stream very close to the point of use. So you completely eliminate the need to transport it, you completely eliminate the need to produce it centrally, right? So you solve a lot of logistical problems, and you pull out, as you liberate the hydrogen, what remains is carbon in a solid form and with very high value, thanks to how we're doing it. But in order to do it, it has to be a very distributed system. You cannot have 4 shifts of 3 operators manning each system. So we rely a lot on my experience from industrial automation, from remote monitoring, digital twin technology that we're developing for this sort of in a very fundamental way.
So, but if we were to look at this technology or the process to go from natural gas to hydrogen, I mean, is this essentially pyrolysis, methane pyrolysis, or what is the pathway by itself?
Yes. So yes, it's methane pyrolysis, which means that we heat the gas and we crack it. But what's special about it is how we heat it. So we're using something called microwave plasma, and back when we started doing this work, basically the industry said there's no way microwaves or plasma or microwave plasmas together will ever be industrially relevant, but we persevered. But what it allows us to do is to get really high heating rates volumetrically. So we can heat gas streams at 10,000 degrees per second. So in a very small volume, we create this very focused electromagnetic field, which literally rips out electrons from the gas molecules, activates methane, and transfers a lot of energy to those electrons, heating the gas up. And after that, there's no catalyst. It's a very fast single-stage process, which allows us to have this compact, basically deployable system. A single Connex container will generate a ton of hydrogen per day, and you can install it, you can manufacture it, transport it by a truck, and install it with a crane in a single day. All we need is a natural gas feed and a source of electricity, which is 4 times less than electrolysis, by the way.
Okay, excellent. So we'll come back to that, George. But Anna, George made an interesting comment, right? Like we can't quite afford as a startup Aspen. But so I'm curious though, right? I mean, if you look at the energy transition landscape, right? A lot of early stage companies, right? And I can see a lot of interesting ways in which they can use Aspen products and offerings, right? So are you working with a lot of early stage companies, or Aspen is primarily focused on the larger players who have energy transition projects? I guess, what does your customer landscape look like?
Absolutely. So actually you bring an interesting point, because one of the largest group that we are pursuing to partner with are the startup companies that they have these new up-and-coming technologies. And that's one of the, because we really see like the shift and energy transition in the market. So we want to be part of that transition. We want to be the company that provides solution that actually helps companies go through this transition. And our client base, goes everywhere from the large players in the market that you had representations from them in the past 2 days, and a lot of actually startup companies. So I'll put you in touch with our small group division. We can work something out, don't worry.
Sounds good. I look forward to the discount.
I can't help you fund it though. So.
Well, Anna, I hope that you've met some others who are not asking you for a discount at the forum, but one of the things that I have seen in marketing collateral come out of Aspen has been around plastics recycling, for example, right? I don't want to put you on the spot, but we have a full day of discussion on chemicals, and plastics recycling is obviously a big part of it tomorrow. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about, if not plastics recycling, some specific examples where Aspen products are being used and what they are helping solve?
Absolutely, that's a great question, because today was a day of energy transition, and plastic recycling is a contributor to energy transition. And in all the net zero models that you look at, there has been a certain percentage assigned to recycling of waste plastic. So I'm looking forward to actually the session tomorrow. But going back to your question, yes, AspenTech is actually, so we are innovating as the market is going, right? So one of the areas that we are heavily focused on right now is to develop this pyrolysis model for chemical recycling of plastics. We already have several of our customers using our models have been able to recycle PET. But we're also looking into like polystyrene and some of the other plastics. So yes, the short answer is yes, we are focusing on that.
So, if you take something like HYSYS, for example, right, and you then look at some of these new technologies, right, plasma-based methane pyrolysis or, advanced pyrolysis of waste plastics, like, is there a lot of new development of the underlying equations and the underlying science and physics, if you will, that has to be done?
Sure.
And I guess, how is Aspen developing all of that?
So it's like two segments, right? So the engineering fundamentals are not going to change. Mm-hmm. Depending on whatever the process, the mass balance, the energy balance is always going to be the same. But what is changing is actually in terms of like the databases. As the new materials are getting created, as the new polymers are getting created, how are you adding like these components to your databases that they're up to date with the needs of the market, right? So, and that's something that we constantly are working on. So a great example is the used cooking oil. How many species are in that used cooking oil, right? HYSYS has a database that covers specifically that applications and all the components that go into reprocessing and creating renewable diesel, right? So, and on top of that, we are also, again, going back to your opening, talking about like innovation and AI, we believe in AI as a facilitator, not necessarily a solution on its own. So we rely on first principle engineering every time, but what AI comes into play is coming and helping us to closing the gap. And sometimes, again, because of the operational complexities, first principles models, only you are not getting the full visibility into your operation. So that's where we're leveraging AI in our different tools. So our AI tools is not just one particular software, it's embedded into every piece of our engineering or control system applications.
Thank you, that's helpful. Brendan, maybe talk a little bit about some work that you've done at some of the energy companies, or I know you've been quite active in and around utilities, so maybe talk a little bit about some specific examples. Who have you worked with, what have you done for them?
Yeah, well, one that springs to mind, because it's kind of along the AI theme, so Boardwalk Pipeline is a client of ours. They would have been using older tech from IBM, analytics tooling, analytics software. Software that's still available today. I mean, it's still supported by IBM, and it wasn't quite doing what cross-border pipeline wanted to do, and it needed more advanced analytics, more predictive analytics, but it couldn't, fund it, right? Because it was still paying IBM in this case for this particular product, which is a product called Cognos. People may or may not know that, but they needed to release funds to pay for the new technology that they invested in. So what we did was we knew they were going to transition away from the particular product that they had. We took that under support. You asked me earlier about some of the value, so in taking it under support, the cost is reduced, but the response times are just much faster, right? So they're getting much faster response times from our people because of our support model, which is actually, despite the fact that we're not the manufacturers of the software, we're still able to respond faster to the problems. That's because we care. So in that transition, they moved away from the old product that they were using. They freed up a lot of money over that period. They were then able to turn off that product that they had and then release all those funds essentially that they released during the period that they worked with us, and then subsequently then they put into the new predictive analytics tooling, which has AI capability in that. So they wouldn't have been able to do that. They just simply didn't have the money to have another tool sitting alongside the one that they had. And they wanted to start that process of migration to a cloud-based predictive analytics tool. And so we helped them do that. And through supporting what they had already until they were finished using it. And then they were able to free up the people actually and the money to go invest and spend the time in, tuning and training the new models that they have in their new tool in the cloud. Right. So that's an example of how we help somebody in this particular industry. But we also help people like Southern California Edison and Exelon and NiSource, who provide energy, to consumers and businesses in very similarly, right? They're not the producers of the energy, but the distributors of it. And so they're all modernizing, right? They're modernizing and building what's known as microservices in the cloud, if anybody knows about that. But they can't do that again unless they can't modernize on their mainframe unless they have funds to do that. So we've helped all of those companies modernize on or off the mainframe by giving them back capital, basically.
And so when you look at utilities like SoCal Edison and compare it to, let's say, Boardwalk Pipeline, right? Do you see differences in the way they think about digital IT, or it's not material enough?
Their outcomes are possibly different. So what are they trying to achieve? What does digital transformation mean, and what does modernization mean? Of course, they're going to mean different things, right? Because they're modernizing in different ways. But ultimately, it's about how do we grow faster? How do we provide a better service to our suppliers and to our consumers? How do we grow, and how do we use modern techniques and modern tooling to do that? So whatever the output is or the outcome is, we're kind of agnostic of the specific outcome, but we can help them get there, right? So modernization is a big word, right? I mean, modernizing, if it's on a distributed environment or if it's on a mainframe environment, you can modernize on it or you can modernize off it. But what you're actually doing with the AI to drive a better experience for your consumers, or to drive better, get better insights from the data that you have, you've got to use tooling, like all the tools that are there providing that. So that's modernization, but you can't do that because you don't. Either way, whoever you are, you don't have the money, unless you've, potentially you're digging it from the ground, which we are here. So the outcomes are different, but ultimately what we provide is a constant support service that allows them, facilitates that essentially. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's helpful. George, earlier you said that the technology or your initial your current product offering has to be distributed. Did I hear that right? When you say that, do you mean that it's happening at a much smaller scale, some modular technology? What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be distributed, but it lends itself to being distributed, because we found out in our market research that that's the missing offering in the market. You can make hydrogen very cheaply, right? And capture the CO2 as long as you have a place to put it somewhere, right? But then you have a problem of actually delivering it to the end user. That's the challenge. And we talked a lot, even today, about the challenges of using the existing infrastructure, putting the new infrastructure, and the costs associated with liquefaction and compression and all of that. And so a very elegant way of sweeping all those concerns and costs and risks away is to not generate hydrogen in a central location, right? But distribute that generation to places where it would actually need to be used, whether it's at gas station, or it's next to a boiler, right, that can be decarbonized using hydrogen, or somewhere else. Of course, if you have a refinery, right, that model doesn't really lend itself to decarbonizing a refinery. But there are 200,000 manufacturing plants in the United States alone, that use natural gas for heating every day, and their boilers are not much larger than 50 MMBTU per hour, or maybe even per day. How do you decarbonize that? Are you going to electrify it, right? Are you going to put a carbon capture for every one of those boilers? Probably not. But so our offering kind of is sized to that.
Okay, but what do you do with the carbon on I can see that natural gas distribution is fairly well established. It is diversified. It gets to lots of places. But what do you do about the carbon?
Right, you have to collect the carbon at the site, right, and you have to pick it up. So basically, milk bottle kind of model, and then ideally you have to sell it, right? Basically, what makes or breaks these projects is whether the carbon has value or not. And we are fortunate because, as I alluded, we focused on the carbon side of the equation for, so long. And we know very well how to get, not just the valuable carbons, but different types of carbons. And we can tune that, that system accordingly. But, ultimately, yes, our carbons have value, and it's enough to actually even subsidize the hydrogen production itself. So our customers right now are utilities that need to decarbonize their natural gas offerings. And we hear again and again and again that we have the best value proposition out of however many 30, 50 methane pyrolysis companies that have popped up over the past 3 or 4 years.
Excellent. Let me open this up to questions from the floor.
This question is for George. What scale have you demonstrated your technology? Till what scale? What is the maximum capacity?
Right. So our commercial unit, which we're going to start deploying in 2025, is going to be based on 4 microwave systems. So basically 400 kilowatt. We have built a single one of those systems, 100 kilowatt, right now in the lab, and we have a 36 kilowatt system deployed at one of our natural gas utility partners sites right now. So we have just tripled our max capacity, and we have to quadruple it again, but it's done by replication. So 4 of those guys are going to fit in a single container unit, and that's going to be a single commercial unit that we'll be able to manufacture and deliver and drop in anywhere hydrogen is needed.
So a follow-up question for George. So what are you doing with the carbon, right? And how are you building your kind of handling capabilities? Right.
So we have worked with the carbon black companies, basically with all the majors, for a number of years now. They have confirmed both that we actually are making carbon black, that the carbon black is of pretty high quality and has value, and that we can make it consistently, actually, from different compositions of the natural gas, not even just the pipeline gas, but even from associated petroleum gas. We can make very pretty consistent carbon material. So now it's the matter of collecting it and having an offtake.
Yeah, this is Roman Wolf. I have a couple of questions. The first one, when you mentioned the capacity, the kilowatts, it didn't quite ring in my head, right?
Right.
Because it was, a hair dryer is 1,500 kilowatts, so you're smaller than a hair dryer? Or did I get the units wrong?
Sorry. So,
Yeah.
1,500 kilowatt. That's a 1.5 megawatt
so that was
dryer.
like my heater at a Hans Biofuels. Anyway, so the real question was, how is the business model or technology different than Monolith? They're the ones that have been sort of carrying the flag on the pyrolysis and making carbon black. They don't talk hydrogen very much. They talk about carbon black a lot.
Right, and they have they have the actual commercial, or they used to call it commercial. I think now they're back to calling it a pilot plant, but it's absolutely giant and very expensive. They're using a very similar approach to ours. They're using a plasma, but it's a thermal plasma. It's very hot, and so they have to scale this thing to be pretty large to actually operate and be viable. The advantage of our approach is that we can make the units much smaller and still have them be economically viable. So that allows us to have a completely different business model. Monolith is centralized production of hydrogen and carbon black. Ours is distributed.
More questions?
So my question is for Origina or AspenTech. How do you see the role of AI, ML evolving in the industries that you serve?
You're first.
So absolutely. AI can. I give you a couple examples, right? How it can be embedded into engineering tools, how it can serve as soft sensors, and in the longer term. We hear, for example, this is another example. So we hear constantly that there is like an exodus from oil and gas industries. Young people are not very interested, or when they come on the job, they're not as experienced. How do you make sure that they are fully fully empowered or capable of doing their job? Right? AI, it can be a great tool to do that. So actually, in one of our tools. Which is the process control, advanced process control. For those in the room who are familiar with the technology. So we have actually embedded an AI chatbot in the tool. So it's like, I don't know, you chatting with any chatbot online. So the process, or the control engineer can actually ask a question, and the chatbot can answer it. And these are all enabled by AI. And I think that's really the frontier that the technology is going.
Yeah, I guess similar. When we talk to our customers, it's probably four things, if I can remember the four. It's really driving new revenue, so identifying ways to drive new revenue, so innovation in what our customers are selling to our customers are selling to their clients. Driving down the cost of that, so identifying ways to reduce cost using AI. Improving customer service and therefore reducing churn using AI. A lot of that can come through using bots. Even in our own business, we use a lot of people to do things, and there's many ways we can use AI to kind of take out the human out of the equation, right? And put people to better use, sending emails or something, right? Particularly in a sales organization, like we send a lot of emails to customers to promote what we do. It could all be done, sorry Clay, it could all be done through AI, right? You inject in, what do you do, who's your target audience, and you could easily get AI to send out as many emails as you want to every target audience, every persona, and make it look like it's personalized and coming from a person. And you can have a conversation, rather than using lots of outbound email tools that are essentially written by people. But in retail organizations that we deal with, financial services, it's about reduced churn, better customer service, faster time to market, product innovation, efficiency and effectiveness. I mean, they're kind of generic, and then you apply that to the sector that you're in, right? So it's pretty powerful stuff, right? But it's how do you actually then get one of these the many tools that are out there, many variants of AI tools actually in use in anger? That takes a bit of work.
And also, in your experience, while you support whatever IBM or HCL tools that are being already used, do you see a lot of requests for, say, specific tools that they need to develop to maybe augment what they are already using?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we do in our journey with a customer is so we're saying to them, quite frankly, that what they have and what they're doing can be done much faster, better, faster, cheaper, right? To be crass about it, right? So, but we're also asked, well, if we stop spending money with the vendor, it doesn't matter if it's IBM or Oracle or SAP or Microsoft or whoever it might be, and we are going to move to an alternative. Well, what might the alternative be? So because we have over 1,000 product-specific experts on the products, on IBM products, who are ex-IBM, in fact. They've been around the products for a long time, 20, 30 years. They know what the possibilities are. So our clients, while we provide support, we also get asked by customers, well, what should we do? Like, what product should we go to? Where could we transition to? What does that look like, and how would we get there? So, and we've loads of examples. I mean, Valvoline is a customer of ours, and they were using an analytics tool which was deployed in a traditional environment, on-premise environment, in their own data center. And the product's pretty old at this stage, the product that they had, but we helped them actually move that into the cloud. We helped them move that into an Amazon Web Service. Don't get too technical here, but we're able to help them do that and help them with that migration, that navigation. So that they were able to save a huge lot of money, get the product out of the data center, and actually modernize I think it's now, Troy will help me here, probably a 17-year-old product is now deployed in the cloud, and they didn't have to buy another cloud product to achieve that goal. So we'd help them with that journey. Now, if they wanted to go to a specific specialist other product, we would also help them figure out, well, what might that be? Because we have the product expertise across a vast array of products, about 800 IBM products, and what is the destination of travel for those products if you're going to have if you're going to buy an alternative. So we would help customers with that all day long. Yeah.
Excellent. We'll wrap that up here. We are at time, so thank you again. Let's give them a big hand.
Thank you.